Also, wars are very profitable, and they're a bank.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
But you think that they might sort of, to Christine's point, lend money but with conditions. So it'll be like you need to start making reform in King's Landing or Westeros. You need to start adopting some ideas too. Would they put those conditions on, or just interest on their?
I really don't know. I don't know. It could be. It could be. It seems plausible. It seems plausible that he introduced us to me as a reader. He introduced me this whole new world of politics. How you do stuff in a fantasy world, in a mid-level world. It seemed to me that he won't leave it only across the channel.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this will fall in Westeros or come to Westeros. In some way, in that way or another. I don't know. Maybe like the chaos in Essos will bring a lot of migrants to Westeros from the free cities, and wildlings. They are coming from the north to the south. With totally different way of thinking of things, and you will have to accommodate them somehow. And the way you accommodate them, it will be a rearrangement of the political order. It won't be like you snap your hand, okay, freedom and social mobility and capitalism for all. But the roots of the roots of this more free world and more a world that's more similar to our world, I see the roots growing now because of the crisis, because of the catastrophe that is coming.
So I had a question. You're talking the politics. So as we watch this show, at least from my perspective, I am cheering for. I am hoping the character that I like, wins this Game of Thrones, which is not necessarily the person who is the best leader and who will it be, which I think of in modern politics, especially in the U.S., I can't speak to the others, that in a lot of ways we don't choose the person who would be the best president, we choose the person that campaigns the best or is the best, charismatic thing. So from a historical perspective, did that work in that way? Was it the most powerful leader, or was it the most charismatic leader, that when you're having this upheaval, when you are changing from your rulers, not from a dynasty, but so I hope I'm making sense on my question.
No, it's great question, and sorry to to say that it was always like that.
Okay.
Of course, if you live in a society which the Game of Thrones there, like the politics is based on your blood. So you can be mute and you'll still be king because it doesn't matter. You're the son of a king and you're the firstborn, so you'll be king. But in more open societies like the Roman civilization and the Greek civilization, the power of the words and the rhetoric and demagoguery was basically the same as today. You could have a lot of power because you know how to talk. You have the gift of gab, and a lot of the criticism towards democracy that we have in our hands from that period of time, 2,000 years ago, from 2,500 years ago, is because of that a charismatic person can come and use his tongue to convince everyone to do stupid stuff. Horrible stuff that is bad for the state. So it's not a new problem. Because of the media today, it's much more big and it comes to our doorstep. But it's not a big change in that sense.
So, unfortunately, there just isn't a way to ensure that the person who is the best ruler is the one who gets to rule. I mean, there isn't a test we can have them take.
Yeah, and I think as a viewer, I find myself torn between that I love Jon Snow. I really think that the character has kind of come into his own, and I was thrilled when he was made, head of the Night Watch. But he was as Wendy talked about, he wasn't a very good politician. He was so focused on the ideal that he said, okay, I don't want to build a kind of consensus where we can work together. And so I don't know if Dany will be a good king, because I think she has the right ideas, but can she execute well? And so it's interesting to see that we get wrapped up into that character, but not necessarily just because we like them doesn't mean they should be the ruler.
Jesse, you've just described every issue I have with voting on politicians. Like, I like this person, but honestly, I don't know if their ideas are the right ones or if their ideas are going to pan out in the end. The problem is probably most people don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe the whole premise, which is the people who want to rule come forward versus ruling is a duty and a responsibility. So it's an entirely different process. You don't actually get to raise your hand to do it. You get selected to do it because you're qualified versus claiming you're qualified and then finding out later that you really weren't. And because when you think about it, in any time period, certainly today, why would you want to be in charge of these things? I mean, seriously, there's got to be some major issues that you're trying to work through if you want to run any country today.
And we wouldn't want the people who want to be in charge. Those are the same people that we wouldn't want them to be in charge.
Exactly.
Like if we have it elected, like the worst people.
Yeah, but it's like the problem with democracy. I love democracy, but
Sure.
One of the problems with democracy is like the politicians that want to get elected. They're trying to convince us they're normal, but we as voters, we don't really want a normal person. We want an extraordinary person that will rule, not a normal person. So it's like we have a dilemma. They're trying to convince us they are normal, but we don't want no normal. Want the exception.
Yeah, I think I think Penn Jillette on his podcast talked about it. When did we decide we wanted just a regular guy to be president? We want an intellectual. We want someone that's better than us trying to lead, and it's interesting. So, and that's the same thing when we go back to the show, right? You want someone who's a good leader. And I don't know if we have a good leader right now in the remaining players in the show. What do you guys think?
I think we have. I think there is a leader and there is like the manager. Both of the characteristics are good to rule and are important. The leader needs to look to the horizon and say, I want to go there. The manager needs to execute it. And I think George R. R. Martin has told, or I got from the Clash of Kings, from the Tyrion chapter, that George R. R. Martin said, really hinted that Tyrion is a very good manager. Not necessarily a leader that looks to the future and says, let's follow me. The very good manager, a very skilled player in the game. And Jon is like a leader that looks at the end game, looks at the real enemy and says, follow me, this is the right direction, but is a bad player. So the question needs to be, what does Westeros need now, perspective change in leader, or like a good manager that will make the deals and prevent civil war?
I think a good manager.
Yeah, I think so too. A good manager.
I think it needs both. I think those two characters, whoever fills those roles, I think they work best together. I think you need a leader, that people will listen to and follow because they're charismatic, but that leader needs a good manager to properly execute their ideals.
Yeah,
and
that's the problem. I
don't think you can have
the monarchical system, the monarchy, that you give too much power and too much responsibility, to one person.
We need a good duo.
Yeah, because I mean, you have to have a vision and a strategy, an overall strategy, but then you have to have the tactical day-to-day execution to get there. And I think that's a criticism of not just Jon Snow, but of Dany too. Is, you know, she has a bold vision, but her tactics aren't all that great sometimes. I want to switch a little bit and talk about some of the characters, the medieval characters that you think are directly informing some of the characters we see in the story. And I'm a big fan of Sansa, so I loved the video you guys did predicting that Sansa was following Elizabeth I's path. So I want to hear you talk about that a little bit and some of the others.
They're not necessarily from the medieval times characters. I thought about Elizabeth when I read about Sansa and her story, not in the middle of the read, but afterwards. It's difficult for me to say because I'm trying to only mana.
Refrain?
I'm trying to refrain. No, not from. Never mind.
Sorry.
I don't want to do a one-to-one comparison because comparison.
Yeah, and I think everyone's clear that these are just inspiring versus this is her path. Yeah.
And some of the characters, I think they're a mishmash, like in a few characters or a few individuals from history that came together, like Robert, King Robert. The first of his name, very remind me of Henry VIII because in his demeanor and he's fat and he's like the ladies and he doesn't like to rule that much and he likes war and all that stuff. But in terms of the timeline, is more like Edward IV. Edward IV that was from the York family in the War of the Roses itself. And I see the Daenerys Targaryen is reminding me, not in her character itself, but in her role, something like a Genghis Khan fella, like uniting the tribes, horse people tribes, and leading them outside their territory to conquer and destroy. And Joffrey reminded me a lot of Caligula, or at least the popular image of Caligula, one of the Roman emperors that the famous story that he appointed his horse to be a consul. He was very, very crazy and stuff. And also he got something with Nero the emperor, and Henry VI also from War of the Roses that was also a little bit mad and angry and all that stuff.
So you're putting forth a compelling rationale for getting rid of monarchy and all these people you're describing. And we've talked a lot about democracy. So what's the pathway in the world of Westeros to get there? I mean, do you envision any of the characters we know today coming up with the idea of democracy, or even coming up with, you know, a triumvirate type of ruling scenario, or is everybody still locked into the notion that there's one leader?
We have to remember that in the Middle Ages, our Middle Ages, democracy was old idea, an old idea, not a new idea, very old idea, and from the perspective of the intellectual back then, a very bad idea, because you give too much power to the masses. In ancient Greek, some of my professors told me you can translate the word demos, or democracy, as the riffraffs. Like the poor people, like the masses, the asafsufa, we say, like the mob. You know, like so democracy is like the mob. Very negative way of saying democracy. I think democracy in Westeros is very far, but I see some kind of a trajectory, I think, or some kind of a theme that is a separation of power. And some kind of a formation of institutions to hold back like one class or one person from holding too much power.
Yeah, democratic, that's it.
And inside this institution, they act like in a more representative and with social mobility, like we have the maesters and the Night Watch.
They vote for their commander.
Yeah, they elect their commander based on merits. We like to think of the based on merits and not based on his blood. Like you can be a bastard and be a bastard and be like the commander of the Night Watch, and this in the faith as well. These institutions are part of Westeros as a realm, but are outside the Game of Thrones itself, between the houses.
The good of the realm.
They are working for the good of the realm. So I see this kind of institutions and ideas coming from this institution be incorporated inside the mechanics of ruling in Westeros, and in that sense, it's similar to what happened in the last 300-400 years, that the population grew, and you had to incorporate these new groups into society and share the power with them.
And the wildlings also, they are like democratic.
Yeah.
They're like a bit of an anarchy, but they're more democratic.
You were comparing certain characters to life individuals. Do you think it might be based on anybody's life or even?
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
Tyrion.
Tyrion. I thought about Claudius, the Emperor Claudius. From Rome. He also got a TV show from the 70s, from the BBC, I, Claudius. Very good show. I really, really recommend it. And it reminded me of him in the way that he really wasn't ambitious. He didn't play the game. This Claudius fellow and Tyrion didn't start the story as a player.
And to get to the top.
He wasn't that ambitious, but he got power. Never mind why, but he got power, and this power was put on him, and from his sense of duty and the need to work for the common good, he became like a good emperor. And if you think about it, like in a sense of political philosophy, Plato, the philosopher, said that the good ruler is the one that doesn't want to rule. Like, we need to convince him to rule, because if he wants to rule, he will be a bad ruler, because his decision will be for his own good and not for the common good.
And also Claudius, like during his time, he wasn't respected, even though now we know he was effective in many ways as a ruler. So that's similar to Tyrion a little bit.
Hey, I have a different question. You're talking about the rise of institutions, right? So, the Night's Watch, we kind of understand how it works. And I totally agree with the wildlings. They have their own, it's almost like a council system, or they come to some consensus amongst themselves. So they're ruling themselves to some degree. But the one group that we don't really know that much about, and you guys just did a really interesting video about it, is the maesters, because we haven't gone inside the Citadel yet, although I think from some of the casting news we might go there, and also where Sam Tarly was headed at the end of season 5. And there seems like an opportunity for the maesters to change their role, because my perception of them is the maester kind of decides what he wants his role to be. Maester Pycelle is at the top, and he wants to be a political puppet master. He also does know a lot about potions and science in the context of poisons and how herbs are used and stuff. Then you have Maester Qyburn, who's kind of a mad scientist. You have Maester Luwin, who is more of the historian, teacher, for the Starks, and I think he's also probably a counselor to the Starks. And then you have, Maester Aemon, who's like a historian. He's also sort of the voice of reason. So talk a little bit about the maesters in the context of the story and where you think they might evolve.
The maesters are we are introduced to the maesters as like you said, like Master Pycelle and Master Luwin and Qyburn. We are introduced as individuals who play like as a tool, like a computer. You need something, you need to know something. You go to the computer, you go to Google, and you check it out. They will tell you. You need some potion. You get it from them. You need to know what this king did 2,000 years ago. You ask them, etc., etc. But towards the fifth book, like in the fourth book, in the Fist for Crows, you're starting to see them not as only as individual characters, but as a faction with ambitions of their own and with a certain way they look at society, and they have like ambition to create a world that will be better for them and better for their skills. Like we get a lot of hints that maybe, spoiler alert, maybe they were responsible for the disappearance of the dragons the last time around, like 150 years ago. There are a lot of rumors maybe they were behind all that. And we have another maester that he wasn't in the show yet, Master Maurin, that who said like, who do you think killed the dragons? Like some knight? No, it's Sam. He told it to Sam. We already reached the citadel. Spoiler, sorry. And he said like not wasn't some kind of a knight.
Really modern.
And so I see it as we see the maesters as like a tool, but if we fast forward time, like to today, we see the role of the maesters not only as a tool, but they are like in the core of governing today, like the specialists, the know-how,
doctors,
the doctors, the engineers, the teachers, the specialists. If you're a politician, even if you're playing the game, you need to have some kind of an education, and their values, be knowledgeable, look at the reality as it is, not as you want it to be, and don't be superstitious and be very empirical. Their values that are left in the story, because like there are dragons and there is magic, their values in like the big process of history won, basically. So I see them, they are really as players now. They're not only as individual maesters, but they have ambition to create a world that will have no magic, basically. That is my my theory / wishful thinking.
So, but how does it happen, right? Because it doesn't seem like they have a critical mass right now. They seem to be a very small group of people, at least from the TV show. They're almost sort of like, a monastery. I mean, I have the view that the Citadel's like a monastery, and they kind of look like monks in the way that they're dressed them. And Sam's going there. So are you thinking that Sam is going to be a radical new thinker in the Citadel, where he's going to say, look, you need to stop selling this idea that you wiped out the dragons, which it sounds like that's what you're alluding to, because I've seen them, or the White Walkers are a real threat. We need to go open up these old books and find out how to make Valyrian steel again, and that might be the way that they become relevant to the story?
Yeah. I don't know exactly how they will do it. What I do know, when I read something about the Middle Ages, I'm basically reading what so-called maester have written about the society. So that's a lot of power. It's not a lot of power in the present. But look at from our history as the Jews, like we basically lost all the wars until the current century. We lost everything. We lost the the first temple, the second temple, etc.,
Right.
etc. But we had a written document that we wrote. I say we with a quote unquote, but the ancient Jews wrote this document, this very powerful document, half historical or not really historical, but like with really powerful myth that in your culture, like the first settlers that came out of Mayflower, they called themselves Israelites.
Yes.
This is such a powerful document that a small, neglectable group created that resonated to thousands of years, thousands and thousands of years, especially in the Middle Ages. They took it very seriously in the Middle Ages.
I think in current American politics, it also resonates a lot.
So this is the power I'm talking about. Like,
but there's an interesting tension there, right? Because it's the history as interpreted by whoever wrote it down. And
one
so,
who writes
and when I read the World of Ice and Fire, the Histories book, they use a lot of examples that are supposedly the actual source text, and often you can tell by the tone in which they're written that it is an opinion that is actually being stated, where they'll talk about, well, those people do this and this. It's like, okay, so we're not completely objective, and that's why I'm curious. How do we make in the context of the story? Do you see there coming a point where everyone turns and says, "Tell us, maesters, tell us the answer," or is it or is it just Sam's going to come running in with the ingredients, or is it that Cersei's going to go back to Maester Pycelle? Say, look, I created a monster with Maester Qyburn, or that's where I'm, because I definitely agree with the idea that you have an institution, all these educational, fundamentally institutions that are what get the democracy to work, right? If the mob's uneducated and easily persuaded, then you have chaos. You don't have a just civil society. And it seems like the tradition in the Middle Ages was scholarship and studying the past. Is that really present in Game of Thrones, though? I mean, how much are they really relying on the maesters?
I think one way it could happen to your first question at the beginning of what you said right now. One way it could happen, maybe there was a battle, like the war, like the big battle between the ice and fire, could cause such devastating destruction that they will be, and magic will destroy them maybe in some way, that they will be left as an institution that has an ideology, a way of thinking, and they can point and say, okay, now after all this destruction, listen to us, we know how things work, and that could be a powerful thing to lift up a country from the ashes, to have like a new sense of purpose, maybe, and that reflects the period that comes right after the late Middle Ages, where the story takes place. That's like the early modern period. Those values started to take hold in the period that is right after the period where the story is set now. So this is why Itamar thought that maybe if this is the late Middle Ages, right after that starts the Enlightenment. So it could be like where the story is going, like a translation to this transition from the Middle Ages to the early modern period.
The name Dark Ages was invented by these historians from the Renaissance. They looked at the period before and said it was dark. So they have this judgmental attitude towards a society that didn't give them the opportunity to be educated because they have a lot of censorship and stuff like that.
And we see it in the Maesters when Maester Lewin tells Bran that the Valyrian link chain that he got from the Citadel is made to ensure that magic is always treated as a myth. So they feel slighted by by superstitions that are real in this world.
So, in the context of real history, was there any catastrophic event like the climate change, the others? I mean, was it the plague? What was sort of the mechanism that sort of started that shift?
There were a couple. The War of the Roses was, in Britain at least, politically at least, it was like a really big earthquake. In terms of a lot of the nobility as it perished, and new players came into being, and it started like this unstable. Not that Britain was that stable before, but this unstable, like recurrent civil wars up until the late 17th century, if I'm not mistaken. And every civil war is some kind of an earthquake. And of course, you have the plague, the big plague, the Black Plague that eradicated like a third of Europe or half of Europe. And if you're Eastern European back in the Middle Ages, or Muslim back in the Middle Ages, you had this alien force from the east, the Mongolians that came and destroyed, the Mongols that came and destroyed a lot of stuff. That every destruction later brought change, and in the long term, a big change.
So you know, by the end of the story, that will have a conclusion, meaning White Walker will be mitigated, or the dragons. I know you guys have speculated that dragons are not going to last. So you think that's where the story's building, is that we're going to handle those threats, and maybe we'll just see the kernel of what's coming next, but we won't actually see it established by the end of the show?
I think you're right. Like, we'll see like a hint of the new direction. Like, we'll see all this destruction, because George R. R. Martin said that the ending would be bittersweet. So the bitter would be all the destruction and the deaths of many more of our beloved characters. But then there will be like new roots for something new, something better to begin, and that would be like the sweet part. But it probably won't. We probably won't see it play out in a significant way.
So I want to go to. We kind of need to wrap up, but I want to ask you a question. I think it was Christine's question. If you could talk to George R. R. Martin, what would you want to ask him?
I really would like to have a discussion with him about how he sees history. If he's an optimist or a pessimist towards history. Like you have the saying of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the moral arc of the universe is bending towards more justice. And I would like to say that the way I see history is like short-term pessimism, but long-term optimism. And I would like to make a discussion with him, because I think he's a very wise man, and I would like to hear his opinion. How do you see history is like this recurrent circle of bad things that happen to humanity, or there is some kind of a moral arc or a big arc toward more justice, and that's where I want to understand the story as well, like short-term pessimism towards a long-term optimism, bending the moral arc towards justice.
It's like 98% of the story is going to be very, very pessimistic with a lot of pain and grief, and maybe the last 2% of the story, okay, we have like a new government now, so things will be better. Yay! That's it. The end.
And they all live happily ever after.
Yes.
Well, we need hope.
So the pessimistic view would be that all of this has happened before, and it will happen again, and it's just going to keep reiterating the same non-learning cycle. We just keep doing it over and over again.
Yeah, basically.
Well, I hope it doesn't happen like that in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, we
Well,
do.
I think Jesse has an opinion on that.
Well, I'm hoping. I am interested. The more I listen to you guys, I think back of in my youth, I really loved Isaac Asimov's Foundation series.
Yeah.
Because it was right. He decided to retell the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, right? And so the more you guys talk about this, the more I see the similarities of, because it's a show about, an empire falling and a society trying to help them steer themselves back. So a lot of the maesters. So am I off base, or do you guys kind of see? I don't know if you've read this series, but do you guys see similarities?
I've read the series. I really liked it. It's the Foundation. And yeah, I agree. I never thought about it until you just said, but there are a lot of similarities, yeah. And I think one of the characters also said something about, like, it needs to be bad before it will be better or something like
Yes.
that. Very
Yeah, very nice. Well, I just got to tell you, this has been a blast. I know Wendy's right. We need to cut off time, but I could just spend tons of time talking to you guys. This is fascinating.
Sorry for talking too much.
No, not at all.
I knew
No.
we were going to talk a lot. We talk a lot. But,
Yeah.
but I'm glad that we're ending on a note of, gelatos and Vespas are where we're going ultimately in the long arc of history if we follow the Roman Empire, which is okay with me. So I do want to thank you guys so much for talking with us, and hopefully we'll do it again because you're not stopping on bold predictions in your videos, which we really enjoy.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much.
I love
Thank
the
you so
comedy
much.
in your show also. Keep that up.
Yeah, I do want to compliment you, and I said I got to do my fanboy thing. I love the blend of your throwing in the history, but making it entertaining and having fun. And I'm just going to go on record. Your Hodor episode was genius. I know you got. In fact, when I met Christian at DragonCon, I was almost tempted to, you've got to go see this video, but I figured he didn't want to hear it. But so you guys, way to go.
I
Thank you.
second that opinion. I like the Hodor video as well.
Yeah, I loved it. I had no idea he was such a controversial character.
Yeah, we can talk about it another time. We would also like to give a lot of credit to our editor and the director. He's in charge of most of the funny bits that you see, because we were just talking a lot, and then he edits it and makes us look smarter and funnier by accident.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, and hopefully we will talk again, maybe when
Sure.
Season 6 comes around.
It's a day. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
We love to get your feedback. Call us at 206-202-4182 or leave us a Skype voicemail to our Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV name. We have many ways to keep the discussion going on our blog. Drop by tuningintoscifitv.com and leave a comment. On the blog, you'll also find links to the forum discussions and other links to follow our Twitter and RSS feeds and find our Facebook account.